Welcome to Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Bubba, here we are again. We just continue to mount one Rick and Bubba University podcast after another. Professor Burgess and Bussy here, handing out degrees in common sense, of course, which has now become a superpower. And we're excited this week to talk to Eric Mataxas. He's been on the show a couple of times, and a lot of things that are going on in our country right now, he's been talking about, he's been writing about, and we're going to check in with Eric Mataxas. So welcome to Rick and Bubba University, Eric. How about it?
Eric.
I can't believe you think you're excited. I'm excited to be with Rick and Bubba. You guys are named Rick and Bubba. How can I not? You think I get to interview people like Rick and Bubba on my program? I'm the one having fun. I just want to be clear right now. I'm the one having fun.
Yeah, you look over all the things that you have done. You obviously have the Eric Mataxas radio show, and Bubba and I keep waiting for you to invite us to Socrates in the City. It hasn't happened, but we keep thinking that day you say, and now on this edition from Alabama, here's Rick and Bubba.
I'd like to do that just for fun.
If COVID-19 keeps raging on, we may get in there, Rick.
You're right.
I'm telling you.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about, and before we jump into it, I know that we've been talking about ExpressVPN on the program, and of course here on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. The big problem, when you're out there and you're saying, all right, I'm out there, I want internet freedom. I don't like the fact that I'm on the internet doing what I want to do and going to check the sites that I want to check and get the information that I want to get. And I want to do that without somebody deciding, like we talk about Bubba on the show, it seems like now every day, somebody's censoring me, deciding what I can see, I can't see.
Or spying on me.
Yeah, spying on me, follow me around. And that's why we use, and you should too, ExpressVPN. The problem with the big tech companies, and man, we've seen them before Congress and everything else, is not only do they try to censor what you read, but they track what you do, as Bubba said, online, and they're tracking what you're searching for, the videos that you watch and everything you click. And then what do? They use that data, and then they serve you the ads they want to serve you, and then they match your activity to your offline identity using your device's, unique IP address. So when we use ExpressVPN, the tech companies can't see the IP address at all. So our identity is masked. We're anonymous, and it's a secure VPN server. Plus, ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of the data, and that also protects us from hackers and all those internet bad guys. Now, that may sound complicated. Here's how you know it's not complicated. I can do it. So here's what you do. Go to expressvpn.com. This is you're going to tap one button, and it's going to take about a minute. expressvpn.com, and then you want to put /Rick Bubba. expressvpn.com/Rick Bubba. Now, going to our link is going to get you an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN service for free. And we like saving money. expressvpn.com/Rick Bubba. Eric Mataxas, our guest on Rick and Bubba University. Let's talk about what you got going on, like August 25th. Here it comes. You have another children's book coming out, and the title of it is hilarious, Donald and the Fake News.
Donald and the Fake News. Now, I don't know if the camera will pick this up.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Because, it's hard. But let me just say, I got to be clear with your audience, okay? A lot of times I let people say these are children's books. The first one was called Donald Drains the Swamp. I was on your program to talk about that. The second one is called Donald Builds the Wall.
Oh, yeah.
And the third one, the new one that just came out, is Donald and the Fake News. These are humor books for adults who are gonna get the political humor. So this is a good thing to give to a friend who likes this president. It's even better to give to a friend who hates this president because you'll see what I'm talking about, because this is very funny stuff. But because it's not nasty stuff, it is appropriate for kids. So tons of people are giving these books to their kids. I mean, they look like children's books, and they're sort of children's books, except that I wrote them really to make adults laugh. Adults will get the Nancy Pelosi jokes and the political humor. It's all through these books. Kids won't get that, but they don't need to. It's like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Exactly. That's what I was about to compare it to, the old Bugs Bunny. Yep.
So Donald and the Fake News is about, it's the first two books, everything's going great in the land of the free. And for folks who don't know, there's a caveman named Donald. I'm not mentioning any last names, okay?
Right.
But he drains the swamp, and explains to the people what it is to be free, to no longer be beholden to the folks in the swamp. And they elect him their first president. And everything's going great, everything's booming and whatever. But in the third book, there are some people who they live there in the land of the free, but they hate Donald because he's taken away their swampy privileges.
Yeah.
So they go into a cave and they meet. They call themselves the Resistance. I just came up with that. and the head of it is an old sorceress named Madam Miss Speaker.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And she lives in San Francisco. and all I'm telling you is that there are characters in here that you may recognize.
Right.
All right. I'm not telling you who they are.
No.
I'm not gonna mention AOC by name because then it blows the whole thing. There's a cranky old guy who's kind of a communist sympathizer.
Yeah, we know him.
He looks like Bernie. I'm not saying it's Bernie, okay?
No,
so back off. But this is political humor for adults. And what I've always said, and it's one of the reasons I like you guys, is I think that those of us coming from more traditional or Christian or conservative angle often don't do entertainment. It's all about news, politics. And I think that we need to have fun. So I wrote these books for those of us who think that we want to celebrate what's happening in the country, want to celebrate a president who believes in draining the swamp, calling a spade, and saying, I'm here to be a disruptor. So that's what these three books are. But the last one, Donald and the Fake News, it's like we ripped it out of the headlines. You can't even believe it. At the end of it, the sorceress figure tears up the Constitution. And of course, if that doesn't remind you of the State of the Union, you forgot about the State of the Union. So I really do think we need to have fun and we need to celebrate what is happening because some of the stuff is just so negative. And there you go.
It is. A lot of people feel like it's, a dark time. And, of course, COVID-19 has been a big factor in some of that. But, really, you make a great point. We should celebrate the fact that we are fighting back for a change.
Well, people, it's kind of like you're not allowed to. And I'm here to tell you, oh, excuse me, you are allowed to and you should. Don't let the turkeys get you down, as we used to say in the 70s. I mean, you've got to be bold because what's at stake, I hate to get serious, but it's real. What is at stake is freedom and our way of life. Most people, you mentioned my book, If You Can Keep It. I realized that I didn't really totally understand this. And when I got it, I put it in my book, If You Can Keep It, because I said, if most Americans are like me and they don't get this, we're dead. We need to understand what is at stake, what is happening in the country, and we need to celebrate America and freedom and fight for it. And if we sit on our hands, like so many of my friends said, like, I'm not going to vote because I thought, are you out of your skull? You're going to be living in China in 10 minutes if you don't get serious. You don't do the adult thing and pick. Do you want socialism? Do you want mobs in the streets telling you how to live? I mean, it's almost like become a living cartoon right now where you don't have to talk about what could happen. It's actually begun to happen.
So we're talking on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Our guest today, Eric Mataxas. So in 2016, you wrote the book, If We Can Keep It. And those of you that may not be familiar with it, this is the great quote from Ben Franklin when they came out of the, putting together the first ever Constitution. And he walks out and the woman says, Mr. Franklin, what do we have? He says, we have a republic if we can keep it. I remember interviewing you about that in 2016. And I don't think any of us, back to the humor side of it, we're having a hard time being humorous because we can't exaggerate enough for it not to be the actual situation. I mean, you can't even make stuff up. But when we were interviewing you, I don't think any of us thought that in 4 short years, that question
would be real.
Is legitimate.
Well, I mean, look, the question was legitimate 4 years ago. I'm not calling myself a prophet, but I'm telling you, like, there's certain things, you do the math and it's clear. And where the Democrat Party has gone, listen, I have so many friends that are still stuck on that side of the aisle. They don't understand the party has left them. Yeah. The party, JFK would be a conservative today. This is no longer the party of what we call classical liberalism, which had so many good things going for it. I got to tell you, today it is the party of partial birth abortion. It is the party of forcing transgender education on kindergartners. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that, Dave Wilkerson prophesied in 1975 and people said he's nuts. This is happening and we need to face it. And so the reason my book is called If You Can Keep It is because Franklin did say when he left the Constitutional Convention in 1787, a woman said to him, so, what is this Constitution? What is this government? What have you given us, a monarchy or a republic? And I kind of thought, how kooky that she's asking, have you given us a monarchy? Like, how could Ben Franklin, and then I thought, wait a minute. We never had self-government and freedom on the American model in the history of the world until the founders created this government. So at the time, people understood this is nuts. People have never governed themselves in the history of the world. Have you been able to pull it off? So she's asking him, what have you guys been doing in that room for 100 days in the middle of the summer of 1787? Did you manage to pull this off? Is it going to work? And it ought not to have worked, I'll be honest with you. But by God's grace, it worked. And so he answers her, a republic, madam. So we've given you a republic. And then he says, if you can keep it. And that means that we, the people, are entrusted genuinely with being America. You can't just say we elected people. You have to be vigilant in protecting freedom. If you're not vigilant, there are people, hungry people, who want to take over and they want to impose their will on you. And so we have to fight back. And I think we've had it so easy in America that we've never really had our freedoms threatened. It was always from without. It was always, the Soviet Union or something. Well, today it's within our own borders that we have people trying very hard to take over from within. They've taken over the universities, which we all know. They've taken over the media. They've taken over. In other words, we're no longer the country we were. And if we, the people, don't step up and understand what's happening, and if you can keep it, I put everything in there, which I think is what you need to know to figure out what you want to do about it. But I said, this is the 11th hour. And the reason it's crazy now, and you guys know this, is because Trump, unlike every other president, has been willing to step up to confront some of these dark forces, whether you call it the deep state or China, or there's all kinds of dark forces that are against American style self-government and freedom, against the Christian faith, against anybody of serious faith. They want to take over with it has become cultural Marxism. It's an atheist worldview that says the state has all the power and the state is going to impose its will on you. And Americans need to understand that's the normal state of affairs in the world. Unless you stand up and you fight for freedom, as we've had for 240 something years, you will get one version of that or another. It might be like China. And by the way, if anybody doesn't think China is involved in what is happening right now, they want to take over the world with their style of communism. But they're not going to do it overtly. They don't need to do it with tanks. There's all kinds of ways. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the more you look into this, the more you understand we're at a tipping point. And what I call it is, I say it's an existential crisis like we had in 1776 and like we had in 1860. And if we, the people, do not step up and fight and sacrificially fight, we will lose it. This is something that, and also, if I can say so, I think we need to really, really pray, because I think that it's God's will that this country remain free. But we know from the Old Testament that, God can have his hand on a country and then he could take his hand off of that country. We need to get serious.
Eric, we definitely want to talk about that part of it, but let me ask you this. The current American model has given us the highest standard of living that mankind and recorded history has ever had. But yet we have this mushrooming effect of people who want to be liberal, they want to be socialist, they're rejecting the things that got us here. Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. He has several homes, but he's against other people being able to achieve that. What is the draw for the liberal? How has this happened? And what example are they looking to that they think that we can become? I'm really confused what they're trying to accomplish and why. from a logic standpoint.
I'll tell you why you're confused. I know why you're confused, because it doesn't make logical sense. In other words, let's be clear. There is no way to get there from here. You want to achieve utopia, which is what they seem to be gunning for, where everybody, it's a chicken in every pot. Everybody gets to go to college. It's all paid for, and on and on and on. There is no way.
Payment-free housing. I've heard that term lately.
Whatever it is, I never heard that. Payment-free housing.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Teen Vogue.
That's your mother's basement. That's what it's called.
Yeah, well, Teen Vogue, I know you always looked at Teen Vogue, but we did, but why that's important, and that's what young people are
reading. That's what's influencing them.
And one of their editorials is one of their little writers saying that we should do away with private property completely. Back to, hey, Mr. Franklin, can we keep it?
Yeah.
And they were real big on private property.
I just want to be clear, okay? When I wrote my book, If You Can Keep It, that was really the first time I understood. In other words, I'm confessing here that I went to Yale University, which is one of the most spiritually dark, anti-American places in America. People throw around these terms like, oh, that's a great education. Well, maybe 150 years ago was a great education, but I'm here to tell you that I, myself, grew up and didn't understand this stuff. And it was only until I wrote my book, If You Can Keep It, that I really began to understand that self-government and liberty and freedom on the American model never existed in the history of the world. It's fragile, it's complex, and it's up to we, the people, to keep it. In other words, we have to understand how it works, and we have to kind of practice it in our lives. And a big part of that has to do with faith and virtue. The founders all understood this, that if you do not have faith and virtue, if you don't govern yourself, in other words, why don't I steal and loot? Because I believe it's wrong, not because I'll get caught, but because I believe that God will judge me, that God doesn't want me to do that. When you have enough people who think that way, you don't need that much government. They will govern themselves, roughly speaking. And Ben Franklin and others saw that when revival broke out up and down the 13 colonies because of the preaching of George Whitefield, there's a chapter in my new book, 7 More Men, on Whitefield. And then I write about him in my book, If You Can Keep It. But this evangelist preached up and down the 13 colonies during that season before the revolution. And when the founders, and Franklin especially, saw a revival break out, they said, look at that, crime goes down. Domestic abuse goes down. Drunkenness goes down. These people begin to govern themselves. They don't need a lot of people looking over them and interfering. They govern themselves. That's what freedom is. It's the ability to govern ourselves without a big government telling us what to do. And I think that when I really understood how this worked, I went half crazy because I said, there's no other way to be free. In other words, what the Democrats and the radical left and, it's effectively cultural Marxism are selling cannot work. So we have to just be clear that the reason you get confused by it is because you understand it's not going to lead to what they think, but they believe that it will. And they also believe, this is the key, there's a group of people who want power. They want to be the ones in power, right, so that even if it doesn't work for everybody, it works for them. Right. And that's the definition of corruption, that you have a system that keeps kids going to crummy schools. The democratic cities are falling apart. Their schools are terrible. They don't want to give parents school choice, because those parents will vote with their feet and they'll send their kid to a school where he can get a real education, or where she can get an education where she's not surrounded by horrible influences. Parents will choose that. But the Democratic Party wants to keep power, even though people are suffering, because they won't be suffering. They will have the power. And then what always happens is it's a trade-off. They say, well, it's like you find this in all corrupt countries and in a lot of third world dictatorships. They basically say, if you vote for me, I'll give you this and this and this and this. So they promise you things like free healthcare and free college and all this different stuff. Now, they may deliver on that for a short period of time, but and I know at some point they run out of money and the whole thing goes to Venezuela. It just falls apart. This is math, folks. This is not, my conservative view or this is the math. If they could make it work their way, I'd say, hey, have at it. Have a good time. But people are going to suffer. Poor people are going to suffer. You want to talk about Black Lives Matter, the Marxist organization that doesn't really care about Black lives? if you care about Black lives and you vote for a party that will not stand up to cultural Marxism, you are going to harm the urban poor in America. So we have a responsibility, I think, if we really care about the poor in America, to make sure that we don't give a free ride to cultural Marxists under the guise of Antifa or BLM or whatever they are, because they are a threat to the poorest of the poor. You know, most of us, maybe we'll get by. The poorest of the poor, they're going to suffer. They're going to have more violence. They're going to have less of anything, less opportunity to pull themselves out of where they are. So, you know, you can tell that once I kind of understood this, I just got red hot, because I said, this is the tipping point for America. We've been pushed to where we have the clearest choice we have ever had. And I will not be one of those who says, well, I don't want to get in trouble by speaking up. You know, my heroes are people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and you have to do what is right, and you don't care about the consequences. You just do what's right, and you put the consequences in God's hands. So I will just keep speaking up and writing my books. Some of them funny, some of them not so funny.
Eric, let's say I'm a good Marxist, okay, and I'm out there and I'm spreading the word. But do I ever think to myself, we want to be like insert country, community, city? What is there a win out there that the libs can point to that they go, this is what we want to do?
That's the whole point. That's what's funny, is that in order for you to be behind this, you have to be historically ignorant. But guess what? Most of those folks can check off that box in a New York second. Okay. They are historically ignorant. They have no sense of, I mean, you want to talk about evil? I mean, the Soviet Union, what they did to people of faith, what China is doing to people of faith, many of them Muslims, many of them born again Christians. What these governments do to people of faith is satanic. But the people pushing for Marxism in this country or for socialism, they don't have any sense of the importance of faith, number one, so that they don't really think about people of faith. They just kind of slough it off. And they have no idea that they may end up on the wrong side of things, where they may end up in the gulag or in a prison camp because they said the wrong thing. In order for people to be behind this, and it's why many young people are behind it, is because they simply don't know. My folks taught me to despise communism. My mother grew up in what became East Germany. My father grew up in Greece, where I had the civil war with the Marxists, with the communists of the day. They made me understand that what we have in America is rare. It's not normal, and we need to protect it and preserve it. And by the way, not just for ourselves. We want it to be strong and flourishing so we can share it with the whole world. So the whole world looks at us like a shining city on a hill and says, I want what they have. How do we get that? How can we have that kind of government here? What are the principles of a free market? And I'll be the first to say the principles of a free market and the principles of a free government, of self-government, have to do with virtue and faith. It is inescapable. You cannot get that without this. It just doesn't work. In the book, If You Can Keep It, I talk about this thing called the Golden Triangle of Freedom, which I learned from my friend Oz Guinness. And I never understood this, that I've said it before, but self-government means to be really free, I've got to govern myself. If I don't govern myself, someone will govern me. A tyrant, a bureaucracy, the woke left, whoever it is who has the power is going to govern me unless I govern myself. But if a virtuous people governs themselves and does the right thing because they answer to a higher authority, which is usually God, then you can govern yourself. But you need to protect that freedom from the encroaching state and from others who simply want power. So it's vital we understand this. It's never been so vital because we've been very blessed in this country. But in the last 40 years, we've ceased to teach these things. And it's why I think we've arrived at what I keep calling a tipping point, an existential crisis like 1776, like 1860, where if we the people don't stand up and fight and vote and do whatever we need to do and push back, we're gonna get, you know, what we have sown. We're gonna reap what we've sown.
Eric Mataxas, our guest on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. More with Eric coming up. So, Eric, let's talk about you mentioned it, and I think the thing that's misunderstood, and you touched on it with all this you're talking about, is if you go to the socialism, communist point of view, all you simply do is take what we have, and now the ruling class lives one way, and everybody else lives another way. And
listen, that's reality. When you talk about people about what life was like in Russia or in East Germany, my mother's relatives were in East Germany. Okay, we communicated with them. We visited them in 1971 when I was a little kid. We saw how the people live and how the party members live. Right. If you get high up in the Communist Party and you have power, you live differently than everybody else. So it's two-tiered system on every level. That's history. That's not theory. That is absolute history.
Well, Eric, let me ask you this and follow up on that, because, again, trying to be intellectually honest, if you are a minority or minority rights are something that you are really pushing and working for right now, and we all should be to some point. But if you look at these communist socialist countries, how are the minorities, how are they making it in those countries?
That's a big joke. I mean, you want to talk about racism? The communist China, okay, is openly racist. If you are a Uyghur Muslim, which is basically an ethnic group, okay, they send you to concentration camps. Now, we're not making this up. They harvest your organs. If you're a healthy 28-year-old, they will say, oh, you're a political prisoner. So they will harvest your organs, and they can get $500,000 for what's inside your body. And they have no problem, no moral problem with that, because you're subhuman. You're not part of the party. They decide who lives and who dies. That's reality. And this country, I mean, it's key to say this, that the abolitionist movement, the civil rights movement in this country, these were fundamentally Christian movements. It was the Bible-thumping Christians who were the strongest for the abolition of slavery. The average churchgoer didn't give a hoot. That's just the way things are. But if you believe in the Bible, you are against slavery, and they won. And the civil rights movement, it was the Christians. People don't know. Rosa Parks, Jackie Robinson, they were profound Christians, and that's why they were leaders in this movement. Martin Luther King Jr.'s version of civil rights is Christian. The BLM version is not just not Christian, it is anti-Christian. It is atheistic Marxism, which will get you the opposite of racial harmony every single time. People simply need to know these are the historical facts. And I know that it's complicated, but it's not that complicated. Yeah, well, if you care about black people, right, you had better not ally yourself with BLM. I'm just telling you straight up, they're a Marxist organization. They're against what most blacks are for, which is biblical values, family, all that stuff. BLM is against that. On their website, they say they're against that. But people just kind of float along. They want to be woke and cool. And frankly, a lot of Germans did that in the 1930s. And at some point, you wake up to what you have allowed to happen.
No doubt. And you look at some of the things that you see historically, but keep in mind, and you said it, the problem that we see with especially the younger people in our country is we've allowed this leftist ideology and worldview to completely consume education, and we've let this go on for 40 years. And as the communists will tell you, all we need to do is convince one generation of Americans that the constitutional republic is evil and that socialism and communism is preferred. And if we can get one generation of Americans to buy into that, then the country falls on its own. We never have to go to war. As you said, we don't roll into tanks. So look at this. I was talking with a young person, and they were talking to me about that they were open to this defunding of police. And hey, Mr. Burgess, you have to admit what we saw with George Floyd was repulsive. I said, yes, it was. And there certainly are people in law enforcement that shouldn't be there. And we should concentrate on what we need to do to be sure those people are held accountable. However, you do realize what you saw with George Floyd. And they said, what? I said, an overreach of what? A government agent. You tell me that you want to then remove law enforcement completely and you want to go toward Marxism and socialism. I said that now gives you a more tyrannical, larger central government that then will reach into your life with their police force. All you're doing is seeing the problem with our constitutional republic version of law enforcement, which really boils down to individual people that need to be dealt with. But you're going to replace it with a government overreach that's going to make this constitutional republic that we've let get too big. What you're mad about is a government overreaching and abusing their authority, and then you think the solution is to go with a larger tyrannical central government that will overreach their authority.
Well, I mean, you said it perfectly. And the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people just not thinking this through. There are a lot of adolescents and people, even into their 30s with an adolescent mindset. It's pure emotion. And they don't understand real lives, real people, usually poorer than you, are going to be affected horribly by this. To defund the police is going to harm the poor more than anybody. It's already happening in Chicago,
it is.
Here in New York City. I'm fine in New York City. I don't live in a neighborhood where I'm worried about stray gunfire. But guess what? There are tons of people who do live in those neighborhoods. What about those folks? When you ask them, they don't want to defund the cops. They want more cops because they know that most of the cops are good guys. Most of the cops are the guys that are going to protect them from the bad guys. They know that. They just don't get on CNN to talk about it, and CNN won't have them on to talk about it. But, that's why I'm grateful for your voice, and I do everything I can to speak up, whether in my books or on my radio show, because I feel that this is something that if Americans don't wake up now, before this election, and there's two elements. There's political element, and I would say there's a prayer element. People need to pray because this is something that it's bigger than politics. There are some dark spiritual forces at work to take down a country that has blessed so many people. The American way of life, it's based on the Bible. Okay, we are not a theocracy. We're not a Christian nation officially, but the ideas that we have put forth have led to more human flourishing and the elevation of human dignity and the spreading of opportunity in a way that is absolutely undeniable. People need to know that. But there are forces that want to take it down. And I say, if people don't get real serious, we're going to get, what we didn't want.
So let's unpack that question. You also wrote the Bonhoeffer book. And we read that. My wife and we did a Bible study. I don't know if you even knew that from your book here on our YouTube channel.
Wow.
Yeah, we walked through that entire book because it's important. And the thing that is happening now, I mean, I don't think this is hyperbole. When you see John MacArthur in California, when you see another church in California, I can't think of the pastor's name. It was a McCoy at Calvary. They're talking about putting him.
McCoy, Jack Hibbs, Jay On. These are all people I know. I'm telling you, it reminds me of my Bonhoeffer book.
Okay, that was my question. Yes,
and John, explain that.
I wish it were.
Explain that a little bit for people who may not know the Bonhoeffer story. Give them the 2-minute version of it.
Well, look, it's real simple. First of all, Bonhoeffer was a serious Christian, okay? A lot of people who go to church or they're pastors, they're not serious Christians. They don't know the Bible. They're not willing to die for their faith. He was a serious Christian. And when he saw what Hitler was doing, he knew he had no choice but to stand up, to speak out against it, and to speak up for the Jews because, by the way, Jesus was a Jew.
Right.
And he knew that the enemy of the Jews is also the enemy of the God of the Bible and his people, which is the serious Christians. And that was a fact in Germany. And what we need to understand is that all these totalitarian governments or all of these atheistic worldviews, whether it's the cultural Marxism of the woke mob, they all have one thing in common. The biggest threat to them is people who answer to that higher authority,
exactly,
which is God. If you answer to God, you will not bow the knee, whether it's to somebody screaming at you from a BLM mob or Antifa mob. You will not bow literally or figuratively because you say, my higher authority is the God who created this world. So every single one of these atheistic, totalitarian, socialistic, communistic groups know that ultimately the church, the serious churches, are a threat. They do not like them because they say, we want to be the ultimate power. The state will have the ultimate power, and we're not going to put up with you. We can go back to Caesar's Rome. When you think of the early Christians, they were a huge threat to Rome because Rome said, the Caesar is a demigod. You need to, pinch a bit of incense to the Caesar and to do your worship, your obeisance to Caesar. They said, we can't do that. And so they were a huge threat to the power of the Roman state. Well, guess what? Nothing changes. That ultimately, when things become black and white, you see that either you're going to go with God and take the consequences, or you're going to bow to the secular authority of the state that's going to tell you what to do. So when I was writing my Bonhoeffer book, I must tell you, I could see this coming. I could see that it wasn't going to be, some right-wing, whatever. Actually, I didn't know what it was going to be, but it seems to me that right now you have an ideology, okay, which is being imposed, whether it's, it's all cultural Marxism. So it's this whole bunch of victimized groups. They're perceived to be victims. So whether it's Black Lives Matter, or it's Antifa, who are anarchists, or it's people agitating, and half of the times they totally disagree with each other. I mean, the feminists, radical feminists, totally disagree with the trans rights people. It goes on and on, but they are making common cause because they all agree that they want power, and they don't like who has power. They don't like when we, the people, say, God, we have no king but Jesus. They don't like that idea. And so when I was writing the Bonhoeffer book, I thought, if this happened in Germany, which was not some crazy country, okay, this could happen in America. And as I see things like people persecuting, whether it's John MacArthur's church or all these pastors, you think these are really people with no concept of American-style self-government, who are either governors or mayors, or, God forbid, they're elected president or vice president or senator. They have a similar worldview, and they are persecuting people of faith, and it always starts in the same way. In other words, they didn't persecute Jews in 1933 in the way that they did in 34, 35, 36. It's a tightening noose, but they start with ostracizing these groups and saying, you can't be you can't be in this business. You can't be. So let's say somebody like the head of Mozilla votes for Proposition 8 in California, right? He says, I don't believe the marriage should be redefined. They force that guy out of his job. Right. Let's say some psychiatrist says, I'm a Christian. I don't really believe in same-sex marriage or whatever, so I can't really counsel that. I believe that this. You're gone. You can't be a psychiatrist. You can no longer be in that profession. It's happening to counselors. It's happening everywhere. It's happening all over corporate America. You talk to people who say that we're having to read this idiotic pamphlet called White Fragility, or we're having to have these diversity training sessions. All of it, people kind of go along with it because they say, I want to keep my job. I want to keep my job. Unfortunately, that is what happened in Germany in the early stages. The question is, will the church and the true patriots in America stand up to this? And I'm going to tell you, in Germany, the one group that could have fought and won was the church. Bonhoeffer, and if you read my book, you know the story, he tried to get the church to wake up and to stand. He, like most prophets, they didn't heed his warning.
Don't make trouble. Don't make trouble. They were doing the don't make trouble.
That's the point. Don't make trouble. Just go along. And then you suddenly realize, oops, it's too late. We're stuck. We're surrounded. That is effectively where we are in America. Christians cannot speak their views without being vilified. If you talk about a biblical view of sexuality, if you say, I believe the unborn are sacred human beings made in the image of God, you're ostracized and persecuted. And we're not yet being sent to prison camps. But the point is, we still have a voice. Will we continue to have that voice, or will we just say nothing long enough that we will lose that voice? And then the laws will change. And we're fighting this now. This is like there are lawsuits happening now against Gavin Newsom, The churches are fighting for their life. Businesses are fighting for their life. There's a gym in New Jersey. I mean, everyone in America should raise hell over this and say that I'm not going to shut down my business. I'm not going to, because we're not going to go along forever along this line. We're not going to destroy our economy so that the woke mob can take over. And I think most Americans have a sense of this, but they need to understand what's really behind it.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot. When you're dealing with this, you have to understand, if you've ever been to a national park where it says "Do not feed the bear," and of course, the goofy animal people think that's for the benefit of the bear, so we don't give him junk food. But no, what that's about, if you have 100 marshmallows and you give the bear 99, he still looks at you and says, "And I'll have another." And then when you get to they're all gone, the bear says, "I want more." The bear is very much like the human flesh. It's never satisfied. And so if you think you're going to win over a mob by giving in to them, they just come back and ask for something else. There's never a time that the mob says, "We're good, thank you. That's all we really needed."
Well, that's the comedy. Like when you see the hip mayor of Portland kind of shows up dressed like a young person or whatever, and they just humiliated him. It was like the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And I'm telling you, this is so real. And I'm so grateful that you guys give me an opportunity to talk about this, because this is very real. We need to understand what is at stake.
Well, voices like yours need to be out there, and appreciate that you are standing up and you're writing the books, you're doing the commentary, because it's going to be that. And the last part that we just talked about with the faith, really what's happened in this country, there was a time when the country and even our enemies thought that the answer to our problems was the church. It was the faith. Even people who didn't believe in the deity of Christ, Thomas Jefferson, still thought Judeo-Christian principles serve us better as a society. But let me tell you what's happening now. We're not the solution. Yeah. We're the problem. Yeah. And you just now we've been put in the crosshairs as this Christian deal is not what makes America great. It's it is destroying America. They're the problem. We're not. Let's eradicate them in their worldview and become the godless society that they all desire.
Well, that's why I think there's still enough people in this country who are willing to heed the cry of those who are speaking out and say we need to call. Americans need to be called back to our covenant with God. When you look back to John Winthrop, when he gave his famous speech about a shining city on a hill using the words of Jesus, that we have basically a covenant with God. It's not the way Israel did quite, but Lincoln called us the almost chosen people. There is something that God has done in this country, and he only blesses us to be a blessing. He has blessed this country so that we could be a blessing to others. So if you care about people in other parts of the world who are suffering, you need to understand the Lord wants to use this country. We're supposed to be a shining city on a hill. We're supposed to hold the torch of liberty high. And if that goes out, people around the world suffer. So don't just do this for yourself. Do this for those around the world who would dream of having what we have, this kind of freedom. So there's a lot at stake, guys.
Thanks, Eric. EricMataxas.com. You can go there, and everything we've talked about. He's a New York Times bestselling author. We've given you at least 3 or 4 of his books that are a must-read, especially now. If you want to have some fun, the latest in the series, Donald and the Fake News, is available August 25th. If you want to go back and read, if you can keep it, that's crucially important. Also, the one that came out in April, The 7 More Men. These are 7 men that we look to say we need these kind of people again. Or you can also go and read the book that he wrote on Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If you've never read it, it is an outstanding read. All this is available, ericmataxas.com. And Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Eric,
for being with us on this edition of Rick and Bubba
I appreciate it. And people can go to the YouTube channel, the Eric Mataxas Show, where I interview people, and I'd like to interview you guys, but we'll talk about that later.
Thank you very much, Eric. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast.